Rebecca Livermore, are you ready to fearlessly question today?
Absolutely. I'm very excited, Joey. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Fantastic. I have to say, you are probably up until last week. You were probably one of the people on my list of people I should have talked to at some point in time in my life, but we never connected, and like we've been emailing for a while, and it's actually very nice to actually meet you finally.
Yeah, it's fun to meet you as well. So I don't remember when we first had our first contact, but I'm sure it was well over a year ago.
It's been a while. You have no reason to know me otherwise, so you just actually, for whatever reason, I got your attention. I appreciate you getting, like actually being receptive to that. But other things, I want to catch people up on why you're here. First off, we actually had you booked for another show, believe it or not. And this doesn't happen often, so I'll tell the story real quick. But we had you booked for the show we did last week with your friend who you kindly referred me to, Joy Grobelby, to fearlessly question doing the dirty work. And that's kind of it's kind of interesting because that's the job you're coming out of, and that's what you've quit, and that's where you're at now. So why don't you catch us up and tell us your story as it relates to fearlessly questioning quitting your day job, because you have a lot of very recent experience with this.
That's absolutely right. I have actually made a living doing dirty work for other people, being behind the scenes, doing all kinds of things to help other people succeed. And that has been going on for quite some time. Just to give a little background that you're not even quite aware of, Joey, is that before I quit the job that you know about, I had worked as an executive assistant at a Christian mission organization, and so of course was doing behind the scenes stuff there and helping other people get out and do work in countries all over the world. But I was sitting at a desk and helping the president of the organization do things, but was not up front myself at all. And what happened there is I started just feeling like it was time to maybe go out on my own, and I absolutely loved my job. Now, I know a lot of people quit a job because they hate it, but in my case, I was very fortunate to love my job, so it was a very scary thing to quit and move on. Well, one thing that helped me determine to quit my job is while I was still working that job, I connected with someone that is our mutual friend in our connection, and that's Amy Porterfield. And in a roundabout way, which there's kind of a cool story there, and maybe we can get into it later, but I ended up becoming, at that time, her virtual assistant. And she was newer in her business at that time, and so she was okay with me having a full-time job and working for her on the side. And so after about 5 months of working for her, I got the nerve to quit my job and just work on getting more clients. Okay, so fast forward about 3 years, and during that time that I was working for Amy, I went from being her VA to being her content manager, and she hired a new VA. And that was a really great step up for me. I had always done some aspects of her content for her, but as her business grew, and I was kind of getting burned out on doing email and other things, scheduling and other typical VA things, and really wanted to move more into helping her with social media and content such as doing her podcast production and things like that. Well, it was a really sweet job. Amy's a wonderful person to work for. I love her dearly. She is really good at what she does. And yet I started to have this sense that maybe it was time to move on, because what was happening is that even though I was her content manager and content manager for some other somewhat big name people, I was doing a terrible job with my own content. So the stuff that I really believed in and was really passionate about, I was doing for other people, but not for myself. And I found that when I worked on my own content, it was just so much fun, because I could do whatever I really wanted to, and I was using my own creativity and my own expertise and all of that. And so her business continued to grow and began to be more and more demanding, which is the case as a business grows. I was putting in more hours and doing even less and less of my own stuff. So I had to come to a place where I had to decide, am I going to just focus on continuing to help her build her business, or am I going to do my own thing? And so it was really just effective the 1st of September that I quit, and now I'm focusing on well, my main focus is writing full time, and under my own name, not doing things, not really ghostwriting or doing things for other people. So when you reached out to me, to say, hey, I'd like to have you on this hangout talking about fearlessly quitting your, or no, that's what we're doing now, on doing the dirty work. And I'm kind of like, well, there's been a little change. I'm not really, I'm going to be transitioning. At the time that you reached out to me, I hadn't made the change yet, but was going to be transitioning. And so I felt like I wasn't a good fit for that show. And that's when you came up with the idea for doing this one on quitting your day job.
Well, I mean, I'm more important than I actually am, so I appreciate that. But two, I think this is something that, like I said leading up to this, this is something that everybody has thought at one point or another. No matter when it was, whether it was in high school doing stocking shelves, whatever it is, they have thought about quitting their job. It's when can I not do this thing anymore? Mm-hmm. And in this day and age that we live in now with so much content and everything, there's always something on the side, and it's, well, when do I get serious about it? And it's just this thing that people, I think, really struggle with. I guess I didn't realize you quit your job twice, so you've actually have a little bit more experience at this than I even imagined. I mean, I've quit jobs very unsuccessfully, but we won't talk about that. My first, fearless question off the top of the show here is how realistic, though, is it for everyone to want to or be able to quit their job?
That's really hard to say. I think anyone can do it with proper preparation. And for me, I'll talk about how that looked for me in both of the scenarios. One was with the regular day job that I had. I actually had a really great relationship with my bosses, and so I talked to them very frankly and said, you know what, I'm considering quitting my job in about 6 months. And so that was actually really great because
How did they take that? How did they take that, first of all?
Oh, okay. Well, since I had such a good relationship with them, they were like, no, don't do it, but at the same time, they're like, we really want to support you and what you feel like you should be doing. And at the time, it wasn't public knowledge in the rest of the company. It was just the two executives that I supported. And so they were actually very supportive, and I really liked that because it freed me up to work on this side hustle thing without feeling guilty about it, because I did have a certain sense of loyalty to them. So since I had a pretty good idea I was going to quit my job, I had that idea for about 6 months, I started preparing as if I was going to quit. And what I did was I started saving up vacation time, which they would pay me for when I left. Unfortunately, they didn't pay for sick days that I had accrued because I had something like 25 accrued sick days that I didn't use up. But I intentionally didn't use up my vacation time. I put money away in the bank. I was working for Amy already, so I had that. At that time, that was a pretty small source of income, nothing near what I was making on my job because she was fairly new in her business. And but I started kind of putting my feelers out for other potential clients as well. So when I quit December 31st of, let's see, that was 3 years ago. So that was of 2010, actually. And so I started reaching out to other people, building relationships with other people that I wanted to work for. And obviously, I didn't really want to have appointments with people in December around Christmas time. So I scheduled appointments with potential clients for the first week in January. And in that first week of January, after I'd quit my job, I was fully booked with clients. So it was kind of a process. I didn't just wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to quit, but I did everything I could to put myself in a better position financially. I didn't sock away as much money as I would have liked. It seems like it never works out. You think, oh, I'm going to have 6 months worth of living expenses in the bank, and that didn't happen. But I had about 3 months, and then had at least a little bit of guaranteed income with some good connections for more income. So
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
how I did that.
I think the most important thing that comes out of that for me is that one, you had already met Amy and you were already doing something for her. You were doing something that you kind of wanted to explore further, already in a comfortable environment, so to speak, and
Right.
it lets you kind of feel it out, and also the importance of you never know who you're going to meet to where like you said, Amy was new in her business, and now Amy's just like this massive giant to where she's at now, and that opened, I'm sure, plenty more doors for you to continue to do what you're doing right now.
Right.
Uh, I guess the next question that I would have is how would you then, help people self-evaluate their own quitting ability then?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think some of it has to do with the level of risk tolerance that you have. And it's funny that I say that because I'm not a real high risk person. I kind of like stability,
Yeah, you've
and
quit 2 jobs already.
I've quit 2 jobs. I mean, but I think you have to have a certain level of confidence in your ability to make something work. Like with my situation with quitting from Amy, I'm still working towards rebuilding that income that I've lost. I'm not there yet. And yet, I would not have quit if I didn't have confidence that I could make it work. So there can be some fear. There can be like, I'm not really sure exactly. But you know what? When it comes right down to it, I believe that I can do this. You've got to have that firm belief, because without that, you're not going to feel free to quit. And then I think another thing is, have you really kind of looked into it? Do you have some ideas for how you could make the income? What's your plan? Have you been able to maybe make some money already doing what it is that you're planning to do when you quit? And then also, are there ways that you can kind of ease into it while you're still working your full-time job?
And I think the most important thing in this is that the confidence. It's not so much like walking away from something. It's believing in yourself that you can actually do something else too. It's finding that confidence to say I can do this, and going from there. But also realizing, like you said, which is very interesting that you revealed, that like you're going to take a step back though. Like you said, you're not where you're not making the money you were making 3 months ago, but it's something you're achieving and or you're working towards, but you're not quite sure if you're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, because when you're still working your full-time job, or in my case, I had a business, but the client demands that I had made it where it was very difficult for me to pursue other things. So you can't really just, well, maybe some people do. I have heard of people who have basically replaced their day job income on the side before they quit. But a lot of times it requires you quitting so that you're free to pursue the other things. And the amazing thing about it is sometimes when you quit, that's when different opportunities come up. Because before that, you maybe didn't even have any room in your life for them. And once you quit, you're available to do some things that you would not have been available for had you still been working your full-time job.
Right, and I guess we probably should have, if we were being responsible, should have had like some sort of parental discretion, like advisory before this thing. Like, listen, do not watch this show and quit your job tomorrow. That's not what like we're getting at, because
Yeah.
probably not the best advice. And
No.
'cause, like you said, there's a lot that went into this.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some people who have done that, and that's kind of a scary thing. But I wouldn't really recommend that, especially if you're in a position where you're helping to support a family, you're responsible to people other than just yourself. That's a huge, huge thing to consider as well.
Yeah, the whole when you got little ones running around, scampering around your house, biting at your ankles, it makes things a little more real, and you can't really screw around. So if you're young and you're foolish, and hey, do it. You got to do it is going to actually get you there. If you think just cutting all ties and just forcing yourself to drown in the deep end or try and swim, I guess I'm not gonna go one way or the other than that. It seems like from what I take away from this, the most important thing is get your foot in whatever water you want to kind of potentially swim in.
Yes, that's definitely true. And another thing you can do, especially if you're married and your spouse is on board with you, is look at ways to maybe cut back your living expenses. If it's something that you really believe in, that you want to do, and if your spouse is on board with you, you can, let's say, move to a less expensive place, or are there other things that you can cut to help make this dream a reality?
Having the spouse on board is big. If anybody is married, if you can't sell them on it, then chances are you're going to have a hard time selling other people on it.
Well, that's true, not to mention the fact that it can be really discouraging sometimes to work a business, and I mentioned how certain opportunities have come up since I've quit, and one is that I'm partnering with one of the top Kindle authors to co-author some books. And he is doing an amazing job making really, really good money with Kindle, and yet for that to work for me, because it takes a while even to start getting paid, for the work that you do. And it really helps that my husband's like, we can do this, go for it. It's okay if you're not making the money for a few months. I'm good with that because I believe that you're going to be successful. So I couldn't do it without his support.
I mean, but after those few months, though, then he's really going to be putting the grind to you, though, right? He's just going to say, let's go, Rebecca.
Well, it probably
Turn into
depends
Tony
on what the bank account's looking like, but thankfully, in the meantime, I'm still getting these like random, hey, can you edit this book for me, or this or that type of requests from clients that bring in a big chunk of change. So I'm doing those kind of one-off projects that kind of keep the bank account healthy in the meantime. So.
Well, we're about halfway through the show here, and I know time flies when you're having fun, but I want to turn the tables. You're sweating. We'll give you a break. We'll turn the spotlight on everybody else. I enjoyed this little moment of the show, but I want you to ask the audience a fearless question of your own, something that you've always kind of been a little curious about, but not quite sure if they're going to give you the truth. This is your place to get the truth. So go ahead and ask, and let's see what kind of answers we get.
Okay, so the question that I have for people listening is, what is the most nervy thing that you've done when it comes to reaching out to somebody that you admire and respect?
I love that question, and I don't understand that question at the same time.
Oh, okay. So, well, for example...
No, I understand it personally. I'm just saying for because you paint a picture of what people, like, they're nervous. Like, they have this unjustified sense of like I'd have no business reaching out. Like that's what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. Let's talk about that real quick while we wait and see if anybody does want to bring in some answers to that. But
okay. Well, I'll give you an example of that.
I say you have plenty of experience. I can only imagine the stories you could tell of the things that you've seen.
Okay, so the story that I didn't tell at the beginning was how I ended up working for Amy. And she had published her Facebook Marketing for Dummies book and all of that. Well, what happened is I noticed a mistake in a sales page for something that she was putting out, this new service. And so I got up the nerve to reach out to her and say, hey, hope you don't mind, but I noticed that there's this mistake on your this page, and I think maybe what you meant to say was this, and oh, by the way, I'd be willing to do 50 free pages of proofreading for you in exchange for just knowing I would learn from working with you. And what ended up happening was she's like, oh, I hate it when I make mistakes like that. I would love to take you up on your offer, but how about if, to make it worth your time, in exchange, I do this free Facebook marketing strategy, personalized one for you, for your business. Now, here's what's funny. Wow. I said yes, but I didn't even have a Facebook page at the time. So, I mean, it made no sense, but I saw it as a great opportunity. So reaching out to her was a little bit of a nervy thing because, I didn't know how she'd respond to me pointing out something. I didn't know how she would respond to my offer. Well, what ended up happening is of the very first part of that strategy overhaul thing was her getting on the phone with me for a half hour to talk to me about my business, which I didn't have at the time. I didn't yet have a business. And so to talk with her about that so she could create a strategy for my Facebook page that did not yet exist. So anyway, in that conversation, that's when, and I told her just about my skill set and all of that. To my surprise, by the end of the conversation, she said, well, I'll be your first client. And that was kind of an amazing thing because I had not even considered working for her before. So anyway, that's what comes to my mind is I could have said, well, I don't know how she'll respond. I don't know her. Whatever. I mean, there could have been I don't have a Facebook page, all of these other things. So it was kind of nervy for me to just put myself out there, and yet it totally set the course for the path that my life has been on for the last 3 years.
That's there's so many things that I want to ask you out of that. We would have to do a whole other show on there. First of all, Wow, if you had reached out, if I was Amy, if I'll be role playing and be Amy for a second, I can't, that's amazing. Like I hate it when people tell me when I make mistakes. That drives me nuts. That is the gutsiest thing I've ever heard anybody say on the show. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. And it could have gone either way. I mean, and she could have totally ignored me, or
Yeah. I mean, not only did she not ignore you, she gave you a free strategy session and a job. Like, are you kidding? Like this, like that feels to me like these are the things that like you have to put yourself in those positions to eventually be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
yeah, and it takes nerve to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of other things, I've reached out and applied for things that I maybe am not really qualified for, but I'm interested in doing. And so it's like, hey, why not? I'm going to give it my best shot and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that while we're talking about quitting jobs, we're also when you quit a job, you're finding a new one, and you're not going to be able to find that new job unless you take those chances. Just a real quick story that I might have told it on the show before or not, but I went to HubSpot's Inbound. It was Inbound 13 2 years ago. Ariane Huffington was one of the keynote speakers, and there's like over 5,000 people there. She invited the entire audience to email her directly to write for the Huffington Post.
Wow.
And so I went home and I did. And now I can just write for the Huffington Post whenever I want. But like I don't think anybody else did, which drives me nuts. Like
Wow.
I had a friend that went with me. I said, "Dude, did you email Ariana Huffington like to write for the Huffington Post?" He said, "No." I was like, "I'll do it later." I was like, "What?" So these are the types of things like that I don't like. I mean, help me out because I'm losing my mind here. Like these are the types of things you're talking about, right? It's just seeing these opportunities.
Exactly. And even if you are a little bit nervous about doing it, going for it anyway. Because the worst thing that happens is you're ignored or the person says no. I mean, that's the worst thing that happens.
I mean, they're not going to come like arrest you for like.
No.
I mean, that doesn't even exist. I don't think.
I mean, maybe if you're a crazy stalker and you overdo it, then it's a problem.
There have been a few incidents. I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Bringing it back kind of on track here, we went off on the rails a little bit, but I think there's a lot of good stuff there. This is something that is maybe more closer to home than other people are thinking, but should we be able to do both, like two things, or should we want to, or is it just an excuse, like are we being lazy?
Oh, so by two things, do you mean like working a day job and...
Right. Should we, I mean, are we always going to, even once we get rid of that day job, are we just not going to create another side thing at some point? Like, is it just going to be like a repeating cycle?
I will say, at least in my experience, I'm always doing more than one thing. So that's just kind of my nature. Like when I was working my day job, that was before Amy, I was a freelance writer for sites like Yahoo and some different things. And it's funny because I thought, I don't think I want to write full time. So so I had this job, but then I wrote on the side and really enjoyed that. Then I started working for Amy, and I still kind of did some writing and had some other clients and things like that. And now I still have some clients, but I'm doing some of my own stuff as well. So I think that's pretty normal, or at least it is for me.
All right. Well, so basically you're saying there's never any end to there's always going to be something you're looking forward to quitting, at least at some point in time. So what is it that you're doing now then?
Okay. The only thing that I'm doing besides my own stuff, which I can get into that in a minute, is I'm a staff writer for iBlog Magazine, which is a website and magazine for professional women bloggers. And I do podcast production for one client. That's it. And then on top of that, I'm now, and this is the thing that I'm kind of growing into, is writing a lot of Kindle books and just creating other content, information type products that I can sell. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And what's the thing that you think is going to grab that other spot, that second spot that you have? Is there anything else in the back of your head that your next thing that will lead you to quitting this job?
Well, not right now, but bear in mind that I've only been doing this for about a month, so it'll take a while for me to kind of figure things out. So I think sometimes it just depends on what you're enjoying more than others, and at some point I think if you're meant to move on, you start not enjoying something as much as perhaps you used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the kind of last questions that I have here for you, we might have covered it a little bit, but I really want you to kind of go a little bit more on this, is what's really the most important thing people don't tell you about quitting a job?
Okay, I think the most important thing is that they don't tell you how hard it is to run a business and how much time you spend on non-billable hours. So, for example, I think when I was quitting my job, I thought that the hourly wage that I was charging for at the time what was VA work was really good because it was more than I was making on my day job. But then there's the bookkeeping, there's marketing, there's all kinds of other things that you're doing. And so that hourly wage really needs to be a lot higher, or what you're charging for your products or services or what have you need to probably be higher than what you were thinking they were, because I've heard everywhere from half to two-thirds of your time is spent doing things that you don't make any money doing. It's the smaller percentage of time that you spend actually like charging people for. So that's a huge, huge thing to keep in mind when you're kind of figuring out how much money you need to make or how much money you need to charge for your services.
Yeah, and that's like you said, running. I made the analogy leading up to the show. It's like it's a nice romance. I mean, like it's so much nicer just having the idea of quitting than it is actually being there, living in the reality, because it just crushes the dream in some aspects.
Yeah, exactly. Because when I first started my business, it's like, oh, this is great, but it's like, why am I starting work at 6 o'clock in the morning and still working at 11 o'clock at night? And I had replaced my day job income, but I was working a lot more hours. And in a sense, it was worth it because I then was working from home, which I like, and I had some freedom and flexibility. But it was just a lot harder and a lot more time consuming than I anticipated.
Yeah, and I think one thing I don't know if you watched Gary Vaynerchuk has launched this new Ask Gary V show that he's done, and he said there is no such thing as an entrepreneur under the age of 40 with a full-time job. And I think that's kind of, it's like, people want to pretend like they're, an entrepreneur and running their own business, but they're really not until you're, like you said, until they've had the ability or the responsibility, more or less, to do those things.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to kind of wrap it up here, and I usually like to, at least I'm starting in the last couple of shows here, I want people to walk away with something that they can kind of take action on and do right away. Not necessarily, I don't want to say take action to quitting their job because that sounds terrible, but just to prepare to do something else, to find that confidence, to do the thing that is maybe sitting in the back of their head that they've always been wanting to try and get out. What would you kind of say that would be?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I think I would just say, first of all, to determine what is that one thing. That if you could do anything, what would that one thing be? And then, and I guess this is a second thing, is to map out what would it require to do that. So just like a basic plan, what would it require to do that? So in other words, figure out what that thing is and then count the cost of doing it.
Any suggestions on how they might figure it out? Any tips?
Well, I think looking at what you love is good. It used to be that a lot of people talked about, what can you make the most money with, and that is important. I mean, especially if you're going to quit a job to do it. But it's also important to really love what you're doing, and what are the things that people are always telling you, wow, you're so good at this. Like I've had people back since I was a kid telling me, oh, you write really well, even before I'd even thought about being a writer. So probably you have people telling you, complimenting you on the things that you're really good at as well. And then looking at that and figuring out, are there ways to monetize that? If so, how? And how can I maybe start doing that on the side right now?
I'm gonna have to push back on that a little bit here. I want to get your opinion on this. So everyone says, like, find what you love, find your passion, and I agree with that. But this is coming from somebody who spent probably longer than he should trying to be a musician, and you find out that when you do something that you love, maybe you don't love it. You'll find out if you love it or not when you start to do it and there's money involved, because I usually like to make the analogy of baking a cake. Like, okay, you like to bake a cake for somebody's party on Saturday once a month, once every other month. But then, okay, you're going to open up a bakery and you're doing it for 9 hours a day, 24/7, and it's not that fun anymore. Mm-hmm. Is it that they don't love what they do, or is it just the actually being in business with something ruins that relationship?
I think doing it as a business can, in a sense, ruin it. Because, like you say, it becomes work. whereas before it was just fun. So probably doing it on the side first to find out, do you really love, playing the guitar? I see your guitar there. Do you really love playing a guitar enough to do it however many hours a day that you would have to do it to make a living doing it? And let's say that it's not as much fun. Is it preferable to that day job that you have right now, even if some of the fun goes away from doing it? So yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing for sure, because all of a sudden work is work, and whether you feel like it or not, you have to get up and do it if that's how you're making your living.
Yeah, and the final thing, and I want to get your thoughts on this. The final thing is that it's not even so much the time that it would take you to play the guitar. It's everything that comes along with it. So it's like, okay, you got to book the shows, you got to deal with the other people in your band, you have to actually be away from everything, and you're playing at night, and if you're ultimately going to be successful, you're going to be gone for like 6 months at a time, and it's like all those things. And some people look forward to that, and they don't until you actually get in there doing it. Is there any way that people can kind of acclimate themselves with that environment on a little safer basis?
Boy, I think it's difficult, like with the scenario that you laid out, because so much of it would be difficult to do with a day job. But I think doing as much of whatever it is on the side as you can, and then being realistic about it. So, for example, you just laid out all of these things that would go with making a living as a musician, and really trying to be honest with yourself about those things, and whether or not you really want to be on the road and doing these other things. Is that worth it to you? Is it worth the sacrifices that you have to make as a husband and father in your case? And then we talked already about this a little bit, the whole spouse thing. How does your spouse feel about that? She's going to be, in a way, kind of like a single mom a lot of times, because you're not going to be around, and so on. So I think working through those challenges and being honest with yourself and with those close to you as you kind of grapple with whether or not to do it.
And I think that's the absolute perfect place to leave it. I was waiting for it. I don't think we can do any better than that. I appreciate that, Rebecca. So I do thank you for taking the time to hang out with us here today. Where can people go be a part of your new business? What's kind of your call to action to them? What would you like them to go do?
Okay, well, the best way to connect with me is on my website, which is professionalcontentcreation.com. And then as far as social, the place I'm more active is at our Livermore.
You don't like Google Plus that much. I'm not going to give you too much of a hard time, but we'll get you on the bandwagon at some point.
Yeah, well, actually, I know I should, but it's one of those you got to kind of focus your energies somewhere. And I haven't really done much with Google Plus yet, so sorry, all you Google Plusers.
That's all right. I know your Google Plus is probably how I feel about LinkedIn, so I'm not going to give you too much of a hard time about it. But Rebecca, I do appreciate you taking the time. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you very much. Take it easy, everyone.
All right, thanks.